Hello everyone and welcome back to another Regulation G tier list. This one's going to be a little bit weird because we did have basically the close of Regulation G back in August at the World Championships. So now everything is kind of picking back up where we left off. So we're kind of just basing things off pretty heavily on what happened at Worlds and what I've seen develop over the last few weeks as well. And we'll be going over that. Let me just define the tiers really quickly. Best of the best. Very clearly, nothing to say there. Very strong, very good. Will win you games is a very strong choice as a restricted. A lot less strong but still viable is basically exactly what it sounds like. We're gonna have whatever number of Pokemon at the top, and then after that there's a pretty big drop off, and then it's gonna be going into those kind of guys. Same as above but needs glasses is basically the same category. So keep in mind that this category, like this category here and this category, they are the same. They are basically being tiered the same, only some of them, need to wear a pair of glasses, and it's a little unfortunate because they miss their moves a little too often. You're working too hard, pretty self-explanatory. You guys know why these guys are here, okay? You guys know why they're here. You do not have to leave a comment saying, "Oh, but Mewtwo is amazing." I'm not sleeping on it, guys. It sucks. Anyways, yeah, you can yell at me for that if you want, but it does suck. Jumping into things though, we're gonna go Koraidon. And guys, as much as I love this guy, he is not in that upper percentile of team compositions right now. I still think Koraidon is good. I still think it has the chance to win an event on the correct team if it can be solved. And I think there's a lot of viability there. However, I just don't think it's definitely not as viable as the rest of everything up here. Like it's very clearly there's a drop off between what's going to be up there and what's there. And we'll revisit this and I'll tier everything properly at the end, guys, just to keep everything in order. Because obviously sometimes as you go through this, it's like, well, this should not be where you put it, right? Afterwards, when you take a look back. So we'll have that recap thing at the end to maybe adjust some tiers. But for right now, this is by far not as strong as what's going to go up there later on. Miraidon, I don't have much to say here, guys. It won Worlds. It's going to be in the best of the best here. It literally won the World Championships in this format. There's not much else to say. Yes, it is going to be kind of priority number one when team building, so maybe it does fall off, but it's still an incredibly strong option, and there's not a lot of switch-ins to it. And when you have a restricted that is tough to resist and it's just picking up damage, it's disgusting. There's not a lot to say about it. We kind of already been here, right? Like, this tier list should be around 20-ish minutes, just because there's not a lot to necessarily say. Like I said, we've seen a lot of these Pokemon before, right? And we're just returning to the format. Same with Terapagos. Once again, not a lot to say here. It's got some very interesting matchup spreads that I think definitely keep it in a strong contention for one of the better restricteds. But I overall do feel that you are working a little bit harder than you need to. But just based on the nature and some of the other matchups that you do get with Terapagos, especially on like some of those like cycle around teams, I do believe Terapagos actually has a place in some of like the upper hand of this metagame right now. So you've seen it win a couple tournaments in a row now. At the time of recording as well. So like it's definitely around and it's going to be around, and it's a pretty strong option moving forward. Lugia, don't hate me. It's going down in the trash. The only reason I didn't put it in the trash bin earlier was because you are probably going to see it on a few meme teams, and you're going to see it on like that Muck Smeargle where Lugia is going to come in and then psych up that Moody boosted Muck, right? So you're going to see stuff like that with Lugia. So in a sense, it has a niche use, but it is still, in my opinion, one of the worst restricteds in the game right now. It just isn't there. And guys, keep in mind, I'm just ranking these in terms of my viability. I'm not telling you not to play anything. If you want to play these guys and have fun, by all means, go ahead and do it. But I'm telling you right now, you are going to struggle to try and find wins with a lot of these guys in these categories down below. But I'm not stopping you from having fun. Speaking of having fun, we got a Ho-Oh. And Ho-Oh, I think, is going to beat the allegations of the, why they're here. I think I could see like a Ho-Oh pulling, I don't know, 6 straight Terapagos at a regional, or 6 straight Terapagos and 3 Cali Shadows, and with this high special defense stat that it has, and maybe a cool team supporting it, I could see it maybe making a run. But guys, I'm going to be honest, you are working way harder than you need to be if you are trying to make Ho-Oh win a regional. Like, I could see maybe like some crazy run where it gets, like I said, just the insane matchups and it wins the regional, but I think the odds of that are incredibly low, and I think you're just working harder than you have to in a lot of matchups. It's just not favorable for it. Kyogre coming in, and once again, it's going into the needs glasses category, and we've seen it time and time again with Kyogre. And I'm actually going to talk about Kyogre and Groudon together since they're going in the same category. So basically my thoughts on these two is they actually have interesting matchup spreads. You know, like the Kyogre does pretty well into both the Calorexes. It's nice for weather and just general overall water spout go burr. Big water damage. That spread is disgusting. We've seen it in the past with Kyogre. It is a very oppressive piece if it's allowed to be oppressive. Same with Groudon. You know, big precipice blades. It's able to switch into Miraidon Electro Drift. One of the few ground types at all that actually exist in this format that are actually the least bit viable. So Groudon, just based on that, also has matchup spreads, but we've seen it time and time again where with these two Pokemon, at some point, you are going to have to rely on moves to hit. And sadly, it's just not always going to be the case, right? You are going to get down to a spot where you need an Origin Pulse to connect, or where you're needing a Precipice Blades to connect, and it's sadly just not going to happen. So because of that, I feel like they have to go in like the needs glasses territory. But once again, guys, everything in these top 4 brackets are by far usable. And I think could absolutely make a run at a regional, right? Don't get me wrong. I just think they're, because of these accuracy issues, at some point they're going to come up. Yes, you can build your team to have nothing but accurate moves beside it. You know, you can build your team to say, okay, if I miss an O-Pulse, it's not going to matter too much because my team is built to aid in the process because I know I'm going to miss at some point. But at some point as well, with that said, it's still going to happen where you just need to hit the Origin Pulse or you just need to hit the Precipice Blades. And these guys are coming down here. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. Groudon is definitely a tier below those guys. Sorry, Rayquaza is definitely a tier below those guys. I can't speak. But with Rayquaza, it's one of those ones where you have I can set up with a clear amulet, I can go Swords Dance, E-Speed beside Shenpao, and I can just do a lot. And chances are, hey, I'm going to decimate the entire non-restricted part of this format, right? Nothing wants to eat a +2 Terra Normal Extreme Speed beside Shenpao. Like, there's not a lot that wants to do that, but I also think you lose a lot of viability just based on your restricted matchups not being all that great. Right? You've got pretty much every Miraidon core now running Farigiraf, so that just shuts that part down. So Miraidon doesn't even have to try and live, it just doesn't take the hit. And then because you're faster than Rayquaza, you probably just drop it immediately. If you're talking about any of the horses, Ice Rider you just don't want to be in front of. Calyrex Shadow Rider, once again, similar to Miraidon, it shuts off your priority option, making you not all that great. Terrapagos has that weird ability where it's like, you have the what's a Terra Shell, where it's like everything is not very effective on that when it's at full health. So like that definitely limits Rayquaza as well. Zamazenta just walls this thing as well. So it's like there's just a lot of matchups in the restricted part that mean like Rayquaza is probably not lasting very long if you do decide to use it. I don't think it's like the worst thing in the world, but by far you are working way too hard. Same with the Dialgas guys and the Palkias. It's one of those ones, they're there for different reasons. You are working harder than you have to be to use them. Dialga just doesn't have the upside anymore. In fact, I think the dragon typing is a little bit detrimental to it, right? Like, yeah, okay, you're a special steel type, you get flash cannon, but you're just another dragon type where, oh, special Draco Meteor, but you get that from something like a Raging Bolt. You know, you get this kind of coverage from things that don't need to be restricted, and then you just lack the massive spread move, you know, and not having that big spread move feels really, really bad, especially on a restricted that doesn't have the matchup spread that you'd want it to, right? Like with Miraidon, you can kind of get away with your only spread move. You know, you can go crazy with Discharge, or you can have that spread move be Terra Fairy, Dazzling Gleam, right? And it may not be like the best spread move option, but you do so much damage and you have so much upside outside of not using a spread move. It's definitely viable, right? Same with like the Calorexes. You're going to have that broken spread move, right? Even if your matchup may not be that great, you still have broken spread moves, right? Whereas Dialga, it just doesn't have that going for it. It doesn't have the best matchup spread overall, and I just frankly don't see it doing too much in the format moving forward. Palkia, I think actually opposite of Dialga, has an interesting matchup spread. I would love to see what Palkia could do in a format where it's actually able to hit its moves, because we saw it back in like the Dynamax era where you could Dynamax and just say, I don't care about accuracy anymore, these moves are connecting, right? And I think because of that, that's what allowed Palkia to really go in that format. Now we're back to a format where Palkia just doesn't have the opportunity to hit its moves, and the upside isn't the same as Groudon or Kyogre. Like, the upside of Groudon and Kyogre is you're hitting both targets for disgusting amounts of damage, right? If you do manage to connect that move. Whereas Palkia, it's like, yes, Hydro Pump and Spatial Rend are good moves, but the upside of being only hitting into one target just isn't quite as high to me as the Kyogre or the Groudon. I don't think you're able to build it out as well, but it's usable. You're just working too hard, in my opinion. Giratina, I don't see an upside on. I frankly just don't see an upside where it actually gets anything. I think you know why it's here, guys. I don't need to just explain this anymore. You know why it's here. It just doesn't do much. It just kind of sits there. Yeah, it can lift some hits, but then it doesn't exert enough pressure back, and since it's probably going to be the slower restricted more often than not, it's just taking too much damage before it can actually dish out. Like, everything it uses is like a 3-hit knockout on something else, and it's just dying in 2 hits to things that are faster than it. It's just in a weird spot. It just doesn't do anything. Reshiram, similar to the Rayquaza, it's like it can get away with things, you know? You've got some interesting stats. It does struggle with some accuracy issues as well. But, like, as a whole, it's just not a piece that I want to be using right now in terms of when I compare it to other restricted matchups. Like, yeah, I can throw an Assault Vest onto Thing, give it Shadow Ball, and maybe have some cool tech moves for, you know, some of the bigger restricteds. But at the end of the day, it's not the Dragon restricted I want to be using, and it just doesn't do enough damage. It just doesn't keep up with everything else. It can probably beat up on, you know, the Incin, the Rillabooms, and stuff like that. Just doesn't compete with the top dogs. Zekrom is garbage, and I know I'm gonna catch hate for this, but guys, it's completely outclassed, right? If I'm gonna use a Dragon Electric type as my restricted, I'm using Miraidon. There's no reason for me not to. I would be dumb not to if I wanted a Dragon Electric type to be my restricted. If I want a Dragon Electric type that's not my restricted, I just have Raging Bolt, right? So I think there's just outclassed on being a restricted. And then it's like you don't even get the thing of like, oh, hey, well, I at least have a Dragon Electric type now, because you can get that without utilizing a restricted, right? So I just think it's completely outclassed. You can do some cool things with like Clear Amulet, Dragon Dance. Once again, probably want to throw that beside a Shen Pao, but I just don't think it actually gets anywhere in the format. Could be funny though if like you use it to like beat opposing Miraidon, but you're just gonna get Draco Meteored and die. It's just not worth it. It's just not there. Base Kyurem probably should have been in this category from the beginning. It's just not good. Kyurem Black, it's gonna join its buddy. There's just no upside to it, right? Like, it's cool. I just don't see a massive upside. It's like you can tease things with Clear Amulet, but it just doesn't do it. It just doesn't cut it for me, guys. Kyurem White, I can kind of see maybe being viable, just because Blizzard Spam is something that could potentially do things. You're coming off a base 170 special attack stat as well, so you do hit relatively hard when you want to. I just think if you're trying to introduce Snow into this metagame, where there's already 3 weather setters above it, you also have the odds of Pelipper that are going to be on teams, maybe the odd Torkoal as well. You also have to worry about all the wide guard in the format for a subpar restricted that really is kind of, I hate to say it, like a one trick. I don't think it really gets any farther than that. Like, I think you're just working harder than you need to do. Yeah, you can have some fun with it and maybe get some wins, but outside of that, you're working harder than you need to. Cosmog is the people's champion, guys. It's going in that category. It's its own category. I could have called this category the bag, people's champion, Cosmog. I could have called this category anything. It's there. It deserves to be on its own. It's in a league of its own. Solgaleo, on the other hand, if it were up to me, I would put it here. At the bottom of the bottom. I don't care how good this Pokemon were to be. This Pokemon could be the best Pokemon in the format, and I will trash talk it time and time again. I hate Solgaleo. I refuse to say Solgaleo is good. I will admit if it's good, but guys, I really don't think it's good this time around, and this trash is actually like valid. Like, its big thing, similar to its partner or its counterpart in Duskmane Necrozma, I think I'm going to put them both in working very hard, because they do have interesting niches with like Solgaleo not being able to get its stats lowered, and maybe a Calyrex Ice matchup, and then obviously Duskmane similar stuff if you throw a Clear Amulet on it and then Prism Armor, but it's just, in my opinion, not enough to keep up with the meta. And back when you had Xerneas running rampant, right, and you had Xerneas, Cali Ice. It's like those are two matchups that's like I'm just winning if I pull them, right? You don't have those anymore. You know, yeah, you get the Cali Ice, but now you only get one matchup, and you just don't keep up the pace with the other steel restricted in the format. So it's just not worth it, in my opinion. You just make yourself weak to the Calyrex Shadow for no real reason when you have other options that are just better than it. They're a bit outclassed. Once again, you can use them, just not where I put them. Dawnwings, it's here, but it's vastly below Groudon and Kyogre. Groudon and Kyogre are actually like really, really good. I would have a second needs glasses category if I really wanted to. Put a second needs glasses category about right here and have it be a tier below Groudon and Kyogre. But I will just put it at the bottom of this tier for now. It's just, frankly, guys, not quite nearly as good. Yeah, you have to rely on the Meteor Beam to connect. It's something that has to happen at some point. And it's, once again, similar to other things. You're going to click it and you're going to miss. And then you just don't have the upside. Not quite as much upside as Groudon and Kyogre, but I still think you have more upside than some of these guys down here. So just because you have the option to like do expanding force stuff and maybe matchup check a bunch of people, so go for that. And Lunala, similar boat, right? Wants to hit that Meteor Beam, but I think Lunala has the option to, in a sense, not rely on the Meteor Beam. You have the potential Terra Fairy, the Calm Mind, the Moonblast option, right? That means you don't necessarily have to rely on an inaccurate move to get Lunala set up. I do think, however, if this category was not divided by accuracy, let me make this clear, it would be Kyogre, Groudon, followed very closely by Koraidon, into Lunala. But the way I've set up my tier list doesn't allow me to show that without explaining it. So I'll explain it once again at the end, but that's kind of where I'm thinking with these guys right now. Zacian, similar, definitely above Dawnwings, but definitely below these guys, where it, in a sense where it's going to have to hit the Play Rough. It's got a few matchups, like, you know, if you can hit Play Rough, it probably does okay versus Miraidon. You force things, you get Tailwind on this Pokemon, right? You keep speed with the Miraidon, you outpace it, and if you hit Play Rough, you're probably alright. But it's just not enough because at some point you're going to have to hit that Play Rough. It's not as easy to cycle around anymore. You got nerfed pretty heavily as well, and it just isn't favorable in the metagame right now, I don't think. But there's still an option there. It still has a pretty good ability, still has very nice coverage overall as well. You're just at some point going to have to hit that Play Rough. And in previous formats, it's like, yeah, I'm okay. I can risk missing the Play Rough. But in this format, and after the nerf, I just don't think it's okay. You can't afford to miss that Play Rough. It's going to have to come up in crucial points, and it's not going to feel good. Other Zacian, in my opinion, is just garbage. People tried to be funny with like Clear Amulet at the beginning of format, but that was like well before the World Championships, and we haven't seen anything from it since. So it's staying down here until I'm proven wrong. Zamazenta jumping up, joining right here into the very strong tier. It's funny how we somehow managed to avoid this very strong tier till the end. Zamazenta coming right up near the top. It's one of the best, but it's just not quite on Miraidon level and what I'm going to put beside the Miraidon, in my opinion. It's very, very strong. It matches up well into a bunch of other top restricteds, and that's what you want in your restricted, right? You match up well. You match up check a lot of things. Body press is disgusting, coming off an immediate +1 defense boost. And, you know, you get access to wide guard to shut down some of the Calyrexes. You have a very nice typing. I think overall it's a very strong restricted. I just think it's not quite as strong as some of the other guys that I'm going to put up there. Zamazenta, the regular form, is just not good, guys. I think what makes this Zamazenta even better than not is that additional steel typing. Yes, you don't get access to an item, but that's actually technically better because you can't get knocked off, right? So there's just a lot of upside to having a steel typing, not being able to get knocked off in a format with a lot of stuff like that. So I do think the steel type Zama is a lot better than this guy. This guy deserves to be down here. Eternatus is like interesting to a spot where I want to say it's kind of viable, but at the same time, I feel like it beats everything that's not a restricted. You know, like the Incineroar, the Rillaboom, the Urshifu's, just the cycle like that, Eternatus is pretty good into. But I just don't think it matches up and keeps pace with the other restricteds. I probably should drop Dawnwings down here too. In fact, I'm going to. Like, I just don't think these guys get there, in my opinion. In fact, I'm going to put Dawn Wings back up just because I want to see the People's Champion at the bottom. Anyways, the 2 horses are all that we actually have left. Kali Shadow is going to jump up to the top, and Kali Ice is going to go just below it and very strong. And Kali Shadow, just incredibly, incredibly strong. Very oppressive, fastest mon in the format. Does a bunch of damage left and right. My issue with Kali Shadow is the mirror matchups. It feels like right now you have to have those mirror matchups. You have to Terra out of them. You have to be Terra Dark. You have to be Terra Normal. And yes, you can go away with Terra Fairy because it does help in other matchups. But I feel like that's a lot worse when you go up against like a Terra Normal one, right? So you're hindering yourself by not running a Terra that helps you in the mirror. And by not running a Terra that helps you in the mirror, you're hindering yourself into other matchups. Just doesn't quite feel as good to me as the Miraidon. But by far, it is still one of the best restricteds in the format, hands down. There's no denying that. Calyrex Ice, I would put a tier right in between these guys. I would have a tier after this Shadow Rider, before this Zamazenta, and putting it somewhere right there. Because it is a very strong Pokemon. I just think the current state of the metagame is forcing Calyrex Ice to adapt. What that adaptation is not yet clear. It's had a few rough, larger tournaments in a row now that we've had some of those Victory Road online tournaments, as well as some bigger ones on Limitless. It's had a few rough ones. It's been rough for Calyrex Ice players, but I still think there's hope, and I still think it's a very strong mon naturally. It's just going to be a matter of finding it. So it's going to sit at the top of this very strong tier, but it could very easily be pushed up to the in-between points right now. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to call this a recap. I'll leave a timestamp for this because I know, let's be honest, guys, I know a lot of you are just going to skip to the end and you're going to want to hear this, just the recap. You're going to want to see the final list. And I don't blame you because realistically, we kind of all have our own ideas on the metagame. But if you did just skip to this part and you are curious and unsure, I did go through my reasonings on all of them earlier. But really, really quickly on the recap, Miraidon Win Worlds, it's by far the top dog. Just lots of damage, not a lot of switch-ins to it. Hits everything ridiculously hard, and obviously Win Worlds can't be moved from the top slot. I'm not moving it from the top slot until proven otherwise. Kali Shadow, very, very strong. Does not like the mirror. It kind of has to tech out for the mirror, and that's one of the reasons I have it below Miraidon. Yeah, Miraidon players don't like playing the mirror either, but they don't have to change their Terra or anything for that, for the mirror. They just accept the fact that the mirror is bad. The Calyrex Shadow players kind of need to aid to that mirror match, which makes it, in my opinion, worse versus some of the other stuff. And because of that, it kind of hurts a little bit too much. So it definitely brings it lower. Still a very strong piece. Once again, Calyrex Ice Rider, we just talked about this. Should be in the tier somewhere in between the two. We don't have a tier for that just because I wanted the whole tier list to fit on one page. Don't ask. Anyways, Calyrex Ice Rider, top of the very strong tier. Then I feel like there's a slight drop off. It's not quite as close as it looks, but Zamazenta still very, very strong. And Zamazenta being ahead of Terrapagos is simply because it beats Terrapagos. I feel like their matchup spread versus the other guys that are at the top are pretty similar and pretty favorable. Like Terrapagos has a better matchup into the Kali Shadow than it does into the Kali Ice, whereas Zamazenta likes it the other way around a little bit more, right? But because that Zamazenta has that whole other upside by doing well into the Terrapagos, Zamazenta becomes above Terrapagos there, at least in my opinion. But these are the big five, right? These are the big five in the metagame right now. If you pick any one of these and build a good team around it, you are giving yourself a chance every single game. Every single match. Like, yeah, there's going to be some weird counter team, I'm sure. Like, I'm sure at some point you're going to play, like, Miraidon, and you're going to play, like, Groudon and 5 Terra ground types, and it's going to suck. But, like, I still think these 5 up here are the top of the metagame. That's what you're looking at. That would be the order I rank them in as well. Now, moving on to this category here that, as I said at the beginning, it's the same category. If I had to merge this to one category, instead of separating it by the Pokemon that actually need to wear a pair of glasses to hit their moves, it would look something along these lines. It would probably look something like this. If I didn't separate by needing glasses, this would be that tier, right? But for the sake of the video, I did separate it by Pokemon that need to wear glasses to hit their moves. So we're going down like this. But it's basically Kyogre, Groudon, really good weather setters, just need to hit their moves. They have some pretty decent matchup spreads. And then you jump over back up to Koraidon. And Koraidon, once again, that weather setter has some strong matchups, but it's definitely, like I said, there's that big drop off right between these tiers. There's a pretty large drop off, as these are the best 5 very far front runners, and then these other guys come on in after. I think I'm rambling at this point, but you guys get the deal. Lunala shouldn't be above Ground Kyogre, but it's there because it doesn't have to hit the moves. It doesn't have to rely on hitting things unless you run the Meteor Beam set. And I don't like the Meteor Beam set. That Meteor Beam set would come right down here. But the way I have this tier list sorted, Lunala is here. It's kind of there. It's still pretty decent. Like I said, I think there's something there for the Calm Mind. And just the presence of having Shadow Shield is really, really strong. Zacian, it's going to need to hit a play rough. Isn't what it once was. And then same with the Dawn Wings. I mean, it probably could easily drop down to here. I'm not going to do that, just because I think you can tease a lot of things with Dawn Wings, but there is a pretty big drop off after the Zacian and before the Dawn Wings here. Just make that clear. And then once again, that's anything up here, guys, barring I think Dawn Wings has a chance to win a regional. If Dawn Wings wins a regional, I mean, you know what? I'll make another video and say I was wrong. I will make another video as an apology saying I did not put credit on Dawn Wings' name. I will sign the apology form, but it really should be in here. So if I do this for the 2 seconds, guys, anything in those top 4 tiers, I think I could see winning a regional if it can pull some matchups. But overall, this is what that tier list is looking like to me right now, guys. Pretty much take your pick at any of those top 10 mons, any of those top 10 restricteds I could see winning. I think very clearly, like I said before, those top 5 though are absolutely insane. It's really tough to justify using ones that aren't those top 5, right? But overall, this is where the list is going. I'm going to stop rambling. I don't know how this video got close to 27 minutes. But you know what? Here we are. If you guys do enjoy this content, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help the channel. And of course, I really do appreciate it. But thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you all in a future video.